Imagine a world where we saw nature for what it's worth, where we would recognize the life around us for more than just its beauty. Because almost half of the world's economy, $44 trillion, depends on natural services like pollinating, capturing carbon, and purifying water.
These are all valuable to our economy, but they aren't valued in our economy. Nature like this is being left out of the equation.
Giving it a price tag would make harming just a few trees very expensive. And chopping down an old tree to plant a new one would be bad business. But should we really trust the market to solve climate change?
It also means putting a price tag on something priceless, life itself.
But with that life under increasing threat and the effects of the climate crisis more apparent every year, we are running out of time. Is calculating nature's worth the best way to save it? It's easy to tell when a living thing is valuable.
Like with this tree, it's actually huge. It's old and gorgeous and sits in one of Berlin's most beloved parks.
But it's hard to translate that into a price.
How much do you think this tree should be worth? Like how much money?
No idea.
No price?
Not enough information to value it.
It shouldn't cost anything, it's a tree.
Several Ks.
Several
Definitely
Ks.
several K.
A lot. Actually, I think there's no worth, like in a good way.
Most people have no idea how valuable a living tree is, and why should they? Nature usually doesn't have a price until it's dead.
This is often a huge problem.
Let's say a logging company wants to come in and cut down these trees for timber. We know super well how much these trees cost once they're cut.
So we have 200 oak trees worth of timber on one side, and basically a huge question mark on the other. We don't know the cost of chopping down a forest, or how much value we've lost. That's because there's so much at play. Forests are unbelievably complex ecosystems. One way to estimate a tree's value is to add up what good it does for the environment.
This website from the US does just that. We need to put in the diameter of the trunk, where it's located, and what kind of tree it is. Except I don't know what kind of tree it is.
The value is calculated based on how much carbon dioxide the tree captures,
I'm an oak tree.
how much stormwater runoff it stops,
Tree condition, I'd say it looks pretty excellent.
as well as how many
And trunk
pollutants
size.
like ozone and carbon monoxide it removes from the air.
Now we gotta measure. I feel super weird doing this. It's estimating. Still estimating. This tree this year is worth $109. Over the next 20 years, it's worth $2,207. Doesn't seem like that much for such a beautiful tree. The values are really conservative though, because they're based on things like carbon pricing, wastewater treatment pricing, and improved human health outcomes.
So 200 logged trees would mean $454,000 in ecosystem services lost over the next 20 years. A lot of the tree's value isn't included in that calculation, so it isn't perfect, but it does put nature into the equation. And it applies far beyond logging. Green economists like Chami think pricing nature is absolutely necessary in the fight against climate change.
It's not enough to sing songs about the whales and hold hands and sing Kumbaya and write one more poem about whales.
He led a team at the International Monetary Fund who were the first to put a price tag on a blue whale.
Whales are dying, and if you spoke to a whale, she would say, "Hey Ralph, stop crying about me, leave me alone, go in peace, man. And by the way, you owe me money, because I'm saving your butt."
The IMF team valued a blue whale at $2 million, based on its activities in the ocean that capture carbon. Whales poop at the surface, and whale poop contains exactly what phytoplankton need to grow. Phytoplankton in turn produce at least half the world's oxygen. No whales, no phytoplankton, no oxygen. One way to repay the whales and the other nature is using their price tag to know the benefit of conserving them. This is already happening in the form of carbon credits that individuals or companies can buy to protect an area. Here's how it often goes. Let's say an island wants to profit from protecting its seagrass. Someone like Chami goes there and calculates a value for the seagrass, similarly to how I calculated a value for that tree. Based on that value, a government or company sets up a carbon scheme through which those looking to offset their emissions can pay to conserve the seagrass. And valuations are starting to include more aspects than just carbon. In the future, we could also see credits based on how much biodiversity the seagrass supports. This can also lead to other positive effects, like being able to determine a fine for an oil spill that may harm that ecosystem. They're usually calculated per gallon or liter, but waiting for a fine to be imposed can take years or even decades. Using the value of the environment rather than the amount of spilled oil could give legal action more teeth.
This island is selling the carbon of its seagrass. And now you have an oil spill that destroys the seagrass. You know exactly how much to sue them for.
Putting a price tag on nature can also help underserved communities. It's estimated that indigenous communities manage nearly 1 billion hectares of land globally and nearly 80% of the world's biodiversity. That living nature and intact biodiversity are worth money that's ignored in the global economy. The people who conserve them are working for free. One way to change that is through payment for ecosystem services.
We are living in some of the most poverty-stricken, and we shouldn't romanticize it that we should be left alone to live that way, because that's also not fair.
Minnie Degawan is Kankana'i Gorat, a people indigenous to the Philippines. She's working on ways to make carbon markets more equitable.
Many communities are struggling and they need an alternative source of income.
Instead of paying a carbon offset to a company or government, payments are made to local communities preserving their local ecosystems. Traditional activities like agriculture and controlled burns are key to conservation and something that the communities have always done. If they're getting paid for this, they could build infrastructure like roads or schools, as well as better protect the local environment.
So hold on, this all sounds pretty good, but there's one huge thing we haven't talked about. The idea of putting a monetary value on a tree is just weird. Do you think we should put a price tag on nature?
No, but no, absolutely not. It's sad that we have to. That's the problem.
No. No.
There's an ethical dilemma for communities to say that we will get monetary benefits from standing forests when we have always looked at the forest as a living ecosystem. How do you put a value, for instance, on the fact that these forests are the resting grounds of our ancestors?
That definitely wouldn't make it into a price tag. In fact, most of the price tag is based on the price of carbon. So all the benefits from valuing nature basically rely on global carbon markets.
This website takes scientific data from this tree and multiplies it by the price of carbon to determine the value. The website's from the US, where the price of carbon is cheaper. If the website were from the EU, this tree would actually be more expensive.
This is one massive hole in carbon pricing. It can be different everywhere and changes over time. Carbon markets also make it easy for companies to continue business as usual.
What the kind of carbon market and offset regime is currently doing is allowing major companies to pay with the enormous capital that they have to not change their behavior.
Adrienne Buller wrote The Value of a Whale, a book breaking down the problems with placing a price tag on the environment.
Rather than actually making the really difficult structural changes that need to happen, it's broadly just delaying that process further and further by allowing firms or rich individuals to pay to kind of offset their behavior rather than change it.
And it's hard to know which offsets we can trust, as revealed in a 2023 investigation by The Guardian and others. We've covered these and other structural problems with carbon offsets extensively in this piece. Selling carbon can also reinforce inequalities. In order to put a price on a protected area, remember that someone like Ralph Chami usually comes in to do the valuation. This can be a problem.
Landowners are incentivized to plant non-native plant species instead of indigenous species because it creates a new type of landscape that could bank carbon faster.
June Rubis researches nature conservation from an indigenous perspective.
Critics have used terms like carbon colonialism to describe this new wave of capture and closure of nature by capital.
Indigenous and local communities can end up being told how to manage their own land. And often, benefits go to governments or the companies with just a small percentage reaching the actual communities themselves. That's what nearly happened in Sabah on the island of Borneo. The government tried to sell the forest management rights without the local communities even knowing about it. The now frozen deal was set to be in place for up to 200 years.
Markets are by design disinterested in inequalities. They're excellent at generating them. When it comes to confronting ecological and climate crisis, it is a fundamentally ill-suited approach.
But markets aren't going away anytime soon, and in the meantime, there are some strong arguments for putting a value on trees and bees. And unfortunately, most of the problems are a huge task to solve.
One thing that's never going to go away is the discomfort and wrongness of putting a monetary value on something as majestic as this tree or a blue whale.
But even Ralph Chami wasn't motivated to price nature just because he thought it would be a good idea.
I was not preaching to the converts. I was not preaching to the people that love nature. What's the use? I was preaching to the people who see no value in a living nature, but see a value in a dead nature.
For now, many decision makers only speak in the language of money, not majesticness. Until that changes, valuing nature could make it more visible to them. Something that can be changed are carbon prices. There are calls for an international standard that would put countries on more equal footing. And the most concrete solution that solves both greenwashing and reproducing inequalities is to engage indigenous and local communities in determining the pricing of their lands. Minnie Degawan is working on a fund to do just that.
With or without indigenous peoples, this will continue. I am on the pragmatic side, then what is the best for the communities as well as for nature.
So, should we put a price on nature? In many places, we already have, but just how depends on the circumstance. When we know the value of living nature, it's easier to protect it. And if it's destroyed, fines are way easier to calculate. When it comes to carbon credits or paying people for taking care of ecosystems, we need to carefully examine who's doing the valuation and where the money ends up. Because in the end, we're still relying on market mechanisms, which are exactly what got us into this mess in the first place.
Since we're not going to change the whole world overnight, is this the best way to go? What do you think about putting a price on nature? Let us know in the comments and come back every Friday for new videos.